Welcome back. You're watching IDFC First Bank Presents Leaders of Tomorrow Season 11. You're watching our very special Eye on Dubai series. In conversation now with Carl Fielder, CEO and founder Neutral Fuels. Listen in.
Dubai, known for its iconic skyscrapers and innovative spirit, has been making impressive strides in the energy sector. As the UAE continues to diversify its economy, renewable energy has taken center stage. In this edition of Leaders of Tomorrow's Eye on Dubai special, we explored Dubai's energy sector with Carl Fielder of Neutral Fuels, who is solving the problem of climate change through its net zero biofuel made from used cooking oil to cut the damaging greenhouse gas emissions. The energy and biofuel sector in Dubai and the UAE is not only shaping the region's future, but also inspiring the world.
Thank you so much, Carl, for being on Leaders of Tomorrow.
Very, very nice to be here. Thank you.
So, Carl, the theme for our show this season is Ideas for New India. But now that we are in Dubai, I actually want to kick this off by asking you, what are some of the big ideas that you think will impact the energy sector, or some of the trends or conversations that you have been part of?
Well, there's been a lot of changes over the last 20 years in how we actually deal with climate change in terms of the energy sector.
Yeah.
I think everybody's started to realize now that really the phrase is electrify everything.
Correct.
We need to move a lot more of both our industry and our domestic lives onto an electrical basis. That's quite a challenge, especially in a country like India, because it puts a lot more demand on the grid and means that you have to have more sustainable energy generation opportunities. But they are there, and now we've got to the point, we've proved here in Dubai recently, we've now got solar electricity generation way cheaper than any other form of electricity generation. So in a price per kilowatt hour, we can now charge compared with either coal, gas, any other normal way of producing it. So I think there has to be a big change in the way that we supply electricity to people. And therefore, everybody needs to move towards electric vehicles, towards electric heating and cooling, move away from using fossil fuels, or in India, more traditional ways of cooking. It needs to be more towards electricity. That's going to change the cost structure. It's going to change the way government operates. It's going to change the way the grid works. It's going to change everything.
So zooming out a little bit, talking about COP28, which is around the corner, tell me, what is your take on that in terms of the sustainability initiatives that the country is taking, and how do you see Neutral Fuels playing a part?
Well, it's a big question, and it's complicated. The Rio Earth Summit was in 1992, and that's when the world governments came together and said, we need to reduce greenhouse gas emissions. Since then, we've had 27 COP meetings, and greenhouse gas emissions are 40% higher. I would suggest that maybe the strategy needs a little bit of adjusting.
Sure.
And this is a pretty controversial point, especially in the sustainability community.
Yeah.
But for 25 of those meetings, we excluded the oil and gas industry. And this year, we're hosting COP in one of the major oil and gas producing countries of the world. And we've got the appointed president of COP to be one of the major oil and gas players. A lot of sustainability people don't like that. But for me, if you've had 25 meetings and you're not getting where you wanted to go to, it makes sense to introduce oil and gas, who are majorly part of the solution. I think it's also fair to say majorly part of the problem. But if you don't include them in the conversation, how the dickens are you ever going to get this solved? So I think COP28 has a lot to prove.
Sure. Carl, you've also worked with a lot of the bigger companies, McDonald's, DHL. I'm keen to understand, what's the sentiment like in the corporate world, as far as sustainability is concerned? How are they taking to it?
Well, it's better. I think it's improved. I've been doing this now for quite a long time, nearly 2 decades. And it's moved from being a nice to have, something that they think, well, maybe we should do this because it will look good on our website. They've now gone to, this is a fundamental part of our corporate strategy. I don't think there's many companies in the world that have yet said it's the most important part of our corporate strategy. But I think over the next 5 to 10 years, you will see some of them realize that without a major strategic component being climate change adaptation and mitigation, they won't actually survive as businesses. So they really do need to take this very, very much to heart. Working with DHL and McDonald's and some of the other companies I've worked with is really, really nice because they're pioneers in this. And they've realized that it's not easy.
Yeah.
You have to take risks, you're going to make mistakes, and you're going to get criticized for pretty much everything you try and do. But they're bold enough and courageous enough to actually show people, well, you know what? We will do those things, and we will learn, and we will come up with things that work. And that's what the rest of industry needs to do. It needs to be more courageous and needs to take more new things on board and try them.
Right. And how do you view India as a market? Where does India fit into your plans, at Neutral Fuels?
India's complicated. I know enough to know that India is a very, very complicated market, and I've visited often enough. I've enjoyed my time there, but I would say that it's very hard for us. There's a lot of regulations in place, which are always designed to improve the situation, but sometimes that isn't what the end result is.
Yeah.
So, for example, I can't export biofuel from the UAE into India because the importation of biofuels is banned.
Right.
Equally, I can't make biofuels in India and export them to the rest of the world because the export is banned. But the two reasons that those exist was to promote the local biofuels industry in India, which is obviously what's necessary. And I'm wholly in favour of that. It doesn't make any sense to me to take the raw materials for biofuels and ship them halfway around the world and then import the finished product back into your country. That's two unnecessary pieces of transportation.
Right.
And so the policy, I think, is fantastic, but it needs to be implemented harder. The restaurants need to be mandated to recycle their oil, their cooking oil, and they need to have municipal inspectors that make sure that they do that. We've managed to do that in the UAE, and it's working very, very well. The restaurants can get fined if they don't recycle their oil properly, and if they break the rules more times, they can have their license suspended and they can actually be shut down. Sure. So they've made it both a sustainability issue and a health and safety issue, and the inspectors help to police that. That's one of the things that I think India could really do a little bit better.
Well, just staying on India, recently there has been a landmark development where India is buying oil from the UAE in rupees. It was the first time they did so. So tell me, how do you think this will impact the global trade dynamics? And in fact, for your company as well, how do you view it?
Well, I think it's very positive. I don't really understand why a country as big and important as India and a country as small and important as the UAE should trade in anybody else's currency. It doesn't make any sense to me. I mean, the UAE currency is pegged to the dollar anyway, but we do have a very strong link with our American friends. But if you're buying something from here, why wouldn't you use your own currency? And I do think that there is also a bit more of a sentiment than that. There's a macroeconomic development happening with the BRICS grouping coming together and saying that they actually want to trade outside of the dollar segment. And this hasn't happened officially yet, but it's starting. And to me, that isn't necessarily a bad thing. Competition, everybody would say, is a good thing. And competition in these marketplaces generally improves situations for end users. So I think if the consumer benefits, then everybody should be winning.
Sure. Speaking of Dubai, it's considered one of the most, if not the most sustainable city in the region. What's your take on, the kind of initiatives the government has been putting together, the policymakers have been putting together to, sort of further the agenda of sustainability?
Well, I think the government here has done a fabulous job. I've been here for 14 years now, and certainly I've seen massive changes in the attitude towards sustainability. I think early on the government realised one thing, which is that convincing the local population to change how they do things is going to be too slow. What we have to do is do a lot more things behind the scenes. So we changed the rules about building buildings. So it's not up to you as somebody buying a house whether your building is more sustainable or not, because in the background we've changed the regulations so that the building will automatically be more sustainable. We've also moved towards making our electricity grid a lot more sustainable. We've got a huge impact of solar. We've now got 3 of the 4 nuclear power stations online feeding into the grid. So we've decided that we're going to green the grid so that when you use electricity as a consumer, you don't actually have to make a positive decision. Do I want green electricity or not green electricity? You're automatically getting green electricity. And I think those infrastructure changes will be reflected through other parts of our economy as well.
So finally, as we wrap up this interview, tell me, what is your vision for neutral fuels in the coming years, and what's your overall outlook for the energy sector?
I believe that every city should have its own biofuels facility, creating sustainable fuels from local waste, produced locally and consumed locally. My vision is that that should happen to every city with more than 1 million inhabitants, which puts us in line for about 100, 150 cities in the local region. So that's what I'd like to build out. I'm ready, willing, able, and I've still got plenty of energy left. Watch out.
More power to you. It was lovely chatting with you.
Thank you very much. Thanks for your time.
With that, it's a wrap on this edition of IDFC First Bank Presents Leaders of Tomorrow Season 11. We hope you enjoyed the conversations. Thanks for watching. Goodbye.